Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to the Liberty Report. With us today, we have Daniel McAdams, our co-host. Daniel, good to see you.
Greetings, Dr. Paul. How are you this morning?
Doing well.
Good.
Doing well.
All right.
Looking forward to the day and the week.
Yes, exactly.
I do want to start off, though, with not the most exciting thing about movement to peace, but they call it peace. So we have to look at it. Maybe it's a good deal. Maybe we are moving to peace, and maybe not. If we're not, then we ought to warn some people. Don't believe some of this stuff you hear. And we're reluctant to accept anything until they come up with some reasonable reasons for what they're doing. And what I'm referring to is a headline now and things going on right now, and that is the UN Security Council adopts resolution placing Gaza under control of a U.S.-led board. And, Israel already owns half of Gaza, and they are hysterical that they might not lose it, but they might not get this next half with our support. So anyway, this was UN security resolution, and there's other countries involved, but they only mentioned Trump as the leader. He's going to run this board. And my first thought is it's when they talk about it, when you listen to what Trump says, this is beautiful land. He's probably right. And you could really make a development out here. So I think he's almost like at the board of a real estate deal going on. And in reality, that's what war is all about. It's usually about, real estate, who owns it, who controls it. And that's what's going on here. But the resolution brought back memories for me, Daniel. What I remember so clearly were the resolution dealing with the Korean War. And I remember that because I was in high school. It was 1950, and the resolution was passed, and I can remember vividly my mother talking to somebody else, and she says, "How can we stand getting into another war so soon?" And she wasn't, she was more involved with church activities and other things, but she didn't ever see herself as being somebody involved in politics, but her instincts were very good, but she just could not stand this idea. And shortly thereafter, I had a school teacher drafted that never came back from Korea, and the war lasted almost 4 years, and that was the year between 1950 and 53. And I was, a young teenager at the time, and it wasn't long before the numbers came out. Oh, this little UN resolution. And the reason I mentioned this resolution, this was the first go around, and we're talking about a new one. I hope this new one is a little bit more successful. I for a minute think it will be than the one they did with Korea. Well, 36,574 Americans were killed during the war, and I think 80% of the people, there were more killed. But the UN resolution meant a lot of countries would join in and end this war. Well, we had about 80 or 90% of the deaths made. So it never worked like that. But there was a resolution, and but also remember the end of the Korean War that was started so casually, and they didn't have a declaration. They could have still had a declaration, but they didn't have it. They went along with the UN, with the authority, and when Truman was questioned, "Oh, this is only a police action. We're not going to have a war." Well, I guess today some of our police actions in domestic, situations, I guess we're getting at times 30,000 people killed, but 30,000 people were killed in this on a war that, in some ways, it did bring about peace. But not a very good peace. The peace was settled by outsiders. It was started by outsiders, settled by outsiders. Unlike the Vietnam War was started by outsiders, and us getting involved in was stupid. But we had to surrender and leave. And I keep making the comment, that we have a better relationship with them. When they lost, It wasn't too long. We were traveling there and trading with them. We still do, but it was so artificial. And just think, half of Korea's sort of in another world, but it did not bring about peace. So I tell that story because I'm not very optimistic about this resolution coming up and saying that we're going to have this board, and we'll give it a good name. It'll be the Department of Peace, and that, of course, will make it work all right. But I think it's a tragedy of what's going on. The Board of Peace, it stands for B, and you letter at BOP, BOP. Is a pretty good another BOP. So.
Yeah.
I find this disheartening, and this has just come up. I think it will just delay things. But guess who has Trump has, his fist is down and he's in charge. He will get his way, except there's only one person that is willing to express a veto over this and say, wait a minute, folks, and that's Netanyahu.
Yeah, he's not thrilled about it. I don't usually like to admit that I don't know something, especially when it comes to foreign affairs, but I don't understand this resolution very well. And I don't think anyone else does either. And I think that's why Russia and China abstained from the vote. From what I've read, they didn't want to vote no because some of the Gulf states were enthusiastic about that there at least is a plan. So they abstained and allowed it to go through. I don't know how it will work. I don't think anyone knows how it will work. All that we do know is from instinct that this is the opposite of what I think Trump's base wanted, because rather than disengage the U.S. from this, it actually draws us more deeply in. The U.S. is now going to run Gaza. President Trump himself has said that and admitted it. So we're sucked into this war rather than disengaging from the war, which is what Trump could have done from the very beginning by saying no more money, no more bombs, no more weapons. You guys are on your own. That's the way for non-intervention. But let's look at now. Dave DeCamp did a good write-up of this, of course, as usual. UN Security Council adopts resolution placing Gaza under control of U.S.-led board. That last part is all you need to read. Placing Gaza under control of U.S.-led board. Hamas said they don't want this resolution, and any international force that tries to disarm the group will become a party to the conflict. So the UN Security Council yesterday adopted this resolution. The U.S.-led body dubbed Board of Peace for at least 2 years and authorizes development of an international force to the Palestinian territory that will operate under the watch of the U.S. military. I mean, literally, you only need to read those two things to understand that this is sucking us in, not getting us out. You're right. The Korea scenario is laid bare right there. Now go to the next one. The 15-member Security Council passed with 13 in favor, none against. Russia and China did not use their veto. Rather than they abstained, as I mentioned. Ahead of the vote, U.S. Ambassador to the UN Mike Waltz warned that a vote against the resolution was a vote to return to war. Now, the other thing that I find pretty nauseating, Dr. Paul, and in fact I find it unseemly, is people like Mike Waltz and basically the entire rest of the world, except perhaps Yemen and Iran, they stood by as Gaza was completely flattened. They stood by as the people were genocided. They stood by as 90% of the buildings were flattened. God knows how many thousands of bodies are buried under the rubble. They sat by and did nothing. And now they want to pat themselves on the back because we're bringing peace, now that it's the peace of the grave rather than a just peace. So it is really more than anything nauseating to see a Mike Waltz out there congratulating himself in the U.S.
So I think he has it, upside down from what I'm saying. I'm saying that if you vote for this, it's a vote for war.
Yeah.
He said if you don't, it's a vote for war.
Yeah. We've already had the war.
Yeah, but I just still wonder how they go through this, emotionally, psychologically, and morally. They believe all their garbage, or they just have come around to, in a moral sense, accept this as a proper moral position, or they're able to, divorce themselves from any concern with a moral standard, whether it's following the Constitution, whether a lot of people are going to die, whether we didn't even ask the people in the Congress, permission to go to these wars. And they say, oh, this is just a resolution. This is not going to war. We're not ready to send troops over there unless we have to, and that's the way it started. But it was interesting how the Korean War ended. It become a very big political thing. There was a stalemate really in there. And Eisenhower, I can remember his speeches given. If elected, I will go to Korea. And he actually did. And you can't argue against, there was less killing, but we can go overboard to point out of the ridiculousness of getting there to begin with and then tinkering around with real estate operations.
Yeah, that's exactly. It has a lot to do with it. Well, here's a little bit more about it. Okay. It authorizes the Board of Peace's control of Gaza until December 2027. It leaves open the possibility of Security Council extending the mandate. Over the next 2 years, the Board of Peace is tasked with overseeing a Palestinian, technocratic, apolitical committee of competent Palestinians from the Strip, which will be responsible for day-to-day operations of Gaza's civil service and administration. This reminds me of every plan that's devised from outside to govern a foreign country. We saw it in Bosnia. Remember, they put together elaborate plans for the division of the peoples and the this and then that. We saw it in Libya. We saw it in Iraq. This elaborate plan for reconstruction. There's only one problem. These people know nothing about the country. They have no idea what they're doing. They're just going to superimpose this plan, and it won't work because of that. And that's why we're non-interventionists, because you can't do that. The other thing I want to point out, Dr. Paul, and I think this should be the reddest of red flags for anyone who it does not want us to get further involved. Put that back up if you can, that same piece. This is, I think, critically important. Now, U.S. Central Command has established a military outpost in southern Israel to oversee the International Stabilization Force. And according to Israeli media reports, the U.S. may build a large base on the Gaza border to house international troops. Does this sound like we're getting out of war, Dr. Paul, or getting into war?
Well, they don't look at it in a way of just of the practicality of all this, because it isn't very practical of what they're doing. So if they think they're going to bring about peace and all this, I think they're kidding themselves, but they also have to lie to people or lull them to sleep. And yet they don't want to even get around to trying to link this to the domestic problems we have, like inflation and weak economies and that sort of thing. And yet some Americans, people are starting to wake up, and I think that has helped calm things down a smidgen, in Ukraine, but they're also planning. But they make these plans for rebuilding, so it doesn't bother them. The war itself is incidental. It's the activity. It's a power struggle, and who gets to make the contract, who's selling the weapons, and they do this with the rebuilding. Sure enough, we can predict. Well, they're blatant about it. I mean, our government is already talking about it. We're in charge now.
Yeah,
They're rebuilding a part. They're talking about it to make it look better, but what they don't want to talk about is the roadblock that they're going to have and the diplomacy that they have to get by. But and I'm talking about satisfying Israel, because they're very cautious about these agreements. So we'll see what happens there. I am not optimistic that this is going to make a more peaceful world in the Middle East.
I mean, I think Trump is going to regret very soon that he's named himself the head of Gaza. I think that's going to come back to bite him. But here's the kicker, though, if you put that next one up. Okay, it does demand that Hamas completely disarm, demilitarize, and disarm. Not another weapon, nothing. But it provides no guarantees that Israel would withdraw its troops from Gaza. So on the one hand, one side has to give up all their weapons, and the other side can retain not only their weapons, but the occupation of the territory. And I mean, Hamas, they may be evil, I don't know, but they're not stupid. They saw what's happened in Lebanon when Hezbollah was disarmed. Israel violates ceasefires every single day and bombs Lebanon with impunity. Why? Because they can't shoot back. The world can see very clearly, if you're in a situation where you can't shoot back against Israel, that does not deter them. In fact, it encourages them to shoot more. Well, anyway, here's the White House's take on it, Dr. Paul, and here's President Trump's take. If you put that next one up, Trump is clearly extremely proud of himself. The White House releases something on X. The UN Security Council acknowledges and endorses President Trump's Board of Peace. Trump himself says, "Congratulations to the world on the incredible vote of the United Nations Security Council just moments ago, acknowledging and endorsing the Board of Peace, which will be chaired by me and include the most powerful and respected leaders throughout the world. This will go down as one of the biggest approvals in the history of the United Nations. It will lead to further peace all over the world and is a moment of true historic proportion." He goes on to thank everybody involved. And then the White House posts this next photo of a president clearly very proud of himself. Peacemaker in chief. He sits in a room decorated all in gold. Thankfully, there are no gold toilets visible, but he certainly is surrounded by gold. This kind of hucksterism, this will be the greatest peace ever. I'm afraid he's going to have to eat those words, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think so. And people believe they're invincible, that they can do away with it. And I'm sure he's still very confident, but because his language is always the same thing. But I don't know why there's so much credibility to this. I mean, I have to admit, you and I have talked, we want to always encourage him because at the beginning, I think, even including his first 4 years, he was not this bombastic in the first 4 years. But now it should be, people should be waking up to this because when the market turns down and these wars continue, and there's no way they can prevent the liquidation of debt and how that's going to happen and how we're going to adjust without taking these things into consideration. And the thing that demonstrates this best is, the stalemate into Congress.
Yes.
That's a whole mess. That stalemate, my president, is not too bad, except we were disappointed with the stalemate by the government closing down. They spent more money when they closed down the government.
Yeah, exactly.
Nobody was watching them, something like that.
Yeah. Well, I hope you didn't have breakfast, Dr. Paul, because what I'm about to show is nauseating. And it's Mike Waltz congratulating himself and congratulating everyone on ending this war. You might want to put your earpiece in. Maybe you don't, actually, because listening to Waltz is not very pleasant. The biggest cheerleader for assassinating and annihilating Palestinians is now the biggest peacemaker. If you can cue that video, and we're going to do 40 seconds of Mike Waltz is about all we can take, I think.
So, colleagues, voting yes today isn't just endorsing a plan. It's affirming our shared humanity. It's telling Gaza's and Israel's mothers that the world has not forgotten them. Adopting this resolution today will prove the United Nations can still be a beacon and not just a bystander. Colleagues, the eyes of history and humanity are upon us right here, right now. A vote against this resolution is a vote to return to war.
Okay,
time is not on the side of peace.
Proof that the UN can now have another big role in things.
This is the whole thing. They've designed this. There's a lot of details. We can't quite figure out what it is. But the one thing you can figure out is the Palestinians didn't have a thing to say about it.
Yeah.
They're not going to. Well, they're given pseudo recognition, but they're not participating in this. And that the whole thing is, the movement is that it's just a matter of time that if this continues, that Israel will control all of Gaza.
Yeah. And Jared Kushner will go in and build some condos. And Tony Blair, I'm sure, will be involved because apparently this was Kushner and Tony Blair's plan. This Board of Peace is their idea. Tony Blair is known as a great humanitarian, though. Ask anyone who suffered under his bombs. Anyway, let's move on. While we're in the region, I think this is the same theme. I think, unless you may disagree, but the theme is that instead of getting out, we're getting further sucked in. We're getting further involved in the Middle East, which we had hoped President Trump would take us out, to get rid of the Biden policy of sitting there and watching and letting everything happen and endorsing all of this. No, unfortunately, he just can't pull back. And now this is about put that next one up. Trump says he will sell F-35 fighter jets to Saudi Arabia. Mohammed bin Salman is in D.C. He's meeting with Trump, I believe, as we speak. No, sorry, we're going to skip that one. Go to the next one. Here we go. So they're going to sell them, I think it was 60 maybe. Anyway, they're going to get the F-35s. The only other country in the region to get them is Israel.
Yes, and they make the point that this is very important for Israel because you can leave Israel and bomb Tehran.
Yeah.
But this is another example of crony capitalism.
True.
You know, they're probably not that eager to just see a lot of people killed over all this. I don't think they care that much, or they would avoid it. But no, I don't think that's their goal, is just to see the slaughter. What they want to do is power and control and money making, and this is a good example of this. This is pseudo capitalism, it's cronyism and corporatism, and there's a lot of money involved. And this one becomes political. You know, why should somebody? Why does the president have this authority? You know, here the authority. Oh, okay, all right, we'll sell them. But this one is, you might argue, but for some reason I'm not even going to believe this is quite true. Oh well, it's okay. Saudi's buying these. Yeah. Well, even if they are spending the money, it's still crony. Somebody always gets a commission, and the commissions are you don't read about that.
Well, we socialized all the R&D. We had to pay for all the R&D. We had to pay for all the manufacturing. And then the profits are all privatized by, as you say, these crony capitalist companies.
Right.
You know, they don't provide for the American defense. What they do is they provide massive salaries to their people. Now, go to the next one. This is, so Israeli officials told Axios they want to condition the F-35 sale to Saudi Arabia on Riyadh agreeing to normalize with Israel, but that's unlikely to happen, as Saudi officials have maintained they won't establish diplomatic relations with Israel until there's a guaranteed path. So Israel did want a little something out of this. They didn't get it, apparently, at least from what we can see. An Israeli official told Axios it would be a mistake and counterproductive for the U.S. to sell the F-35s without getting a diplomatic concession, i.e. without Israel getting a diplomatic concession. Now, here's the part I also highlighted, Dr. Paul, because it falls within the theme of sucking us in further. The report also said that if the U.S. arms Riyadh with F-35s, Israel will likely ask the U.S. for security guarantees. That means more military involvement for us in the Middle East.
And somebody's going to put a pencil to it. Oh, well, maybe we can sell more airplanes.
Yeah.
Do whatever we have to do. No, it's a system of government, and we're talking about what happens when the principle of interventionism becomes a saintly objective. You know, do it because it's right. And those flowering words that, you know, if you don't vote for this, you're voting for war. At the same time, they're the ones who create all these wars.
Yes.
But they turn it upside down. When, you know, it's especially true in this last election and the corruption and the political campaign. One party, and one party definitely does it more than the other, is systematically accusing the other side of doing these terrible, terrible things. That means you better look, and now we're finding out, well, that party, they were blaming the other party, and they were doing it. They were worse than anybody. Maybe they understood how the system works, but it is a system that interventionism, and the words aren't great. You don't have to be sophisticated to understand a non-interventionist foreign policy, or stay out of, you know, have a principle of voluntarism for civil liberties. You mean people could do what they want to do if they don't hurt each other, anything they want, and yet they will, turn that around and make it look like you have to do something. You have to have intervention, because what would happen if we didn't have the UN? Boy, that'd be terrible. We'd have a lot of wars going on before we know it. It just look how wonderful the world's been since 1945, since we've had the UN.
Yeah.
It didn't take them long to start something. Their first act before they even got us into Korea is that they sent some vessels around the world to be involved in some Coast Guard mission.
Yeah.
It's terrible.
Meddling. Well, I mean, you touched on it earlier. We're not saying this because we're against Trump. We want Trump to do the right thing. And we think that he actually could become popular again if he started doing the right thing. Unfortunately, this is not that. This is Trump saying, well, I'm going to go in there and make myself the head of everything, because if we don't take the lead in every conflict around the world, well, then it'll just go to chaos. The world simply can't exist without us in the middle of it. Well, that's not true. And we know that. We understand that now. And by the way, but besides that fact, as you would say, we can't afford it anyway, even if it did work. Even if it did work wonderfully, we couldn't pay for it, but it doesn't work, and it's never worked. So we get the worst of both worlds. We're doing something that can't be done, and we're getting fleeced to do it. So it's a loser. It's a neocon foreign policy that it's a shame that he's embraced it.
When you describe it as that, and I agree with it, I always boil down to go one step more. If our side has a set of ideals, morally and constitutionally and practically, that they're far superior to what we have to live with, why aren't we doing a better job winning these fights? And I think, well, we have to do a better job at presenting it. But then you get into who's controlling the information. And we know that the whole idea of what Soros been up to, how he did it, and his friends and allies for more than his lifetime, they have been doing this, and they infiltrated the judicial system.
Yeah.
It is still filled with their adoption of their rules and the rejection of what they should be doing. So it's a shame, and that's why I do spend a little bit of time, and I wished I could do better, is spreading this message, because it's not difficult. It's easy to understand, and it's so valuable. But I think it's the short-term benefits. I can make a buck, I can do this and get away with it. Yeah, I don't want to live this way, but how can I pass this deal up? And they're tempted, and they all of a sudden become part of the system.
Absolutely. Well, I'm going to sign off and thank everyone for looking at the show today. Please hit that like. I'm looking at it now. You can do it very easily. Thumbs up or like, and please share the show around to help us get a broader and wider viewership. And over to you, Dr. Paul.
Very good. I want to thank all our viewers today for tuning into the Liberty Report, because we are going to pursue our best efforts to explain to the people what's really going on, and it's not complicated. We have too much government. The government is not exactly our best friends. Should be. It should be a lot better, but the government would be to make a government like that, we'd have to reduce it by 80%. And then people say, what? Even if you said 20%, they don't even do that. Even if you say 1%, they don't go along with it because the special interests are so powerful. So that means that we have to develop a better technique. I believe it's already here. I think our message gets out a lot better with the internet and the communications that we have now, and reach more people, because I never dreamed that something I would say in a way that I thought was very positive reach a few more people than I did at the beginning, going from 15 to 20 people to come to a college meeting versus quite a few more that has become interested in the cause of liberty. We have to keep that momentum going. I want to thank everybody for tuning in today to the Liberty Report. Please come back soon.